On this Monday night, Russian missiles rain down on Ukraine's capital. The mounting carnage in Kyiv, the struggle to get people out of Mariupol, and Odessa braces for what's next. All eyes on a key Russian ally. The fears Moscow wants Beijing's help.
We will not allow any country to compensate Russia for its losses.
What's at stake for the Chinese government and the West? Seized by squatters. The storming of a mansion linked to a Russian billionaire. And fueling change, how record high gas prices
we've just seen an even further shift
are driving people away from the traditional commute.
Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, David Aiken.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. Russian forces are continuing their push towards the Ukrainian capital tonight. This map shows the current scale of the offensive. The areas in red outline territory under Russian control. The arrows indicate regions in which Russia's army is advancing, and that includes Kyiv, where bombardments are happening at a more rapid pace and the civilian death toll is growing each day. As the attack intensifies, the humanitarian crisis is also worsening, and peace talks that resume today have made little progress. Mike Armstrong is in Ukraine, where he begins our coverage tonight, and a warning: some of the images you're about to see are disturbing.
Those sounds of shelling have gotten closer to Kyiv day by day. On this day, they moved from the suburbs to the city. But it's almost more haunting without those sounds. A surveillance video captures a man in Kyiv out for a morning walk. He hears something overhead, and then a massive explosion. Heavy artillery hit downtown for the first time. Witnesses say 2 people were killed in this attack when a projectile hit the street. In this case, an apartment building was hit. It started a fire. 2 more people were killed. President Zelensky, in an address shot in downtown Kyiv, says the weather may be beautiful, but Ukrainians don't even notice. The skies aren't clear, he says, over Kyiv or other cities. Well, these are shots taken from those skies released Monday from over Mariupol. They show buildings in the port city on fire. Mariupol is encircled by Russian forces. Ukraine says an aid convoy hasn't been able to reach the city, and they haven't been able to move women and children out. It says so far in Mariupol, 2,500 people have died, including this pregnant mother and her unborn child, injured last Wednesday when a maternity hospital was hit by shelling. In another coastal city, preparations. There is fear an expected Russian attack could cut the city of Odessa off from the rest of Ukraine. To get ready, civilians are building defenses.
We work here because we don't know how to kill. We are not professional warriors, but we can help our army.
Now, that army took a sizable hit Sunday when the Yavorov base in western Ukraine was struck by 8 Russian missiles. 35 people were killed and more than 130 injured. As it turns out, it was very nearly much worse. There was an alert something was coming. Most of the base had left their barracks and were in the forest when the missiles hit. Had they not been, a military spokesman tells Global News, the dead would have numbered in the hundreds. Now, I spoke to a Canadian foreign fighter tonight here in Lviv. He didn't want to appear on camera. The code name he's using while here is Maple. He said he was in the barracks when those missiles hit. As it turns out, he was just lucky not to be in one that was hit badly. I asked him why he came here. He said he's had trouble watching people accept what's going on here. He couldn't and wanted to come and join the fight. David?
Mike Armstrong in Ukraine. Thank you, Mike. The number of refugees who have left Ukraine is expected to hit 3 million this week, at about 100,000 people per day fleeing the country. That could happen as soon as Wednesday. The World Health Organization says about 6.7 million people have already been displaced inside Ukraine. Russia is accusing Ukraine of a cluster bomb attack on the separatist region of Donetsk. Russia's defense ministry says more than 20 people were killed in what it is calling a war crime. But Ukraine was quick to deny any involvement, saying the missile is in fact Russian. Neither claim has been independently verified. President Volodymyr Zelensky's office released a video of him visiting wounded soldiers at an undisclosed location. In the video, shared Sunday, Zelensky handed out medals to the soldiers, honoring their courage and dedication. He also recognized hospital staff for their work. Zelensky is scheduled to deliver a speech to Canada's Parliament tomorrow and the U.S. Congress on Wednesday. The world is also watching China very closely. U.S. officials say Russia has asked China for military and economic support. Having China enter the conflict would be a significant escalation with huge implications. But as Heather Yourex-West explains, the stakes are high for China too.
From UN Secretary General, the warning was dire.
Further escalation of the war, whether by accident or design, threatens all of humanity. The prospect of nuclear conflict, once unthinkable, is now back within the realm of possibility.
And yet, as Russia's brutal campaign of violence against the people of Ukraine intensifies, worries that the war could escalate into a global conflict are growing. Following reports that Russia asked China for military and economic assistance, something the Kremlin denies, U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan met with a top Chinese official Monday in Rome.
It was an intense 7-hour session reflecting the gravity of the moment.
We will not allow any country to compensate Russia for its losses.
It would be a very significant and meaningful move if China were to switch from sort of its position of, kind of benign neutrality towards Russia to actively supporting them in any different way.
In part because imposing the same level of economic sanctions against China would be much more painful for the West. Still, backing Russia would not be without consequence.
If China wants to be a worldwide pariah, they'll back Russia. The Chinese are too smart to do that. But the fact that Russia is asking means that they're desperate. I think that Vladimir Putin's back is up against a wall.
Russian forces may have encountered more resistance in Ukraine than the Russian president had anticipated, but Russian forces are slowly gaining ground. It's why Ukraine's president continues to call for more support, repeating his request to NATO for a no-fly zone.
The White House will now be watching China's next steps carefully. It says that while China makes up almost 20% of the global economy, G7 countries account for more than 50%. The Biden administration warning China there will be consequences should it choose to help Russia in any way. David?
Heather Yourex-West in Washington, thank you. And the rising geopolitical risk of China's close relationship with Russia contributed to panic selling on the Chinese markets today. The Hang Seng China Enterprises Index closed down 7%. That's the steepest one-day drop since November 2008. And the Hang Seng Tech Index fell 11%, wiping out more than $2 trillion in value. Russia's northern neighbor, Norway, is leading an international military exercise with 27 countries taking part. More than 30,000 soldiers from NATO and partner nations will carry out air, land, and sea drills in the cold, wintry weather. The exercise is known as Cold Response 2022. It is a biannual military event led by the Norwegian Defence Force. Canada's Defence Minister Anita Anand will be meeting with her NATO counterparts in Brussels on Wednesday. As Abigail Bimman reports, Canada is increasing its military presence for training operations in the Arctic.
This is the first time since the 1950s that we've been operating up here in an ice-capable vessel.
This Navy video about a new Canadian Arctic ship's first deployment circumnavigating North America showcased in a flurry of recent tweets from the Defence Minister highlighting that Canadians are taking part in half a dozen different planned exercises in the North, including Noble Defender this week, NORAD's Arctic air defence operation with 250 Canadians and 100 Americans.
Launching from a variety of bases in the North, intercepting aircraft that will be replicating both adversary aircraft and cruise missile threats.
The deputy commander says the exercise sends a message to Russia.
That we're watching them 24 hours, 7 days a week, and that we are so well equipped, trained, and integrated that any type of attack would be futile.
It's no accident that all of these are coming at the same time, that the conflict, of course, is raging across Ukraine.
Defense Minister Anita Anand is planning a visit to the Arctic herself in the coming months, focused on security.
As we look at the North and our relatively low population density up there, it's not inconceivable that our sovereignty may be challenged.
Russia has been reactivating Cold War bases and recently applied to the UN for a vast extension to its claim on the continental shelf.
Certainly now with the aggressive activity of Russia, it makes us rethink then these other processes that were rules-based but perhaps won't be in the future.
Experts say the crisis also highlights Canada's sluggish contributions to NORAD, badly in need of modernization.
We're the ones who have talked the most about modernizing and bringing up to date our northern capabilities and probably have done the least out of all of the other Arctic states.
Canada will be at the table in the short term with a robust package to modernize NORAD.
Modernizing NORAD is in Annen's mandate letter. Defense watchers say they'll have to see action to believe it on a long-standing promise. Abigail Bimman, Global News, Ottawa.
An anti-war protester crashed a live news broadcast on one of Russia's state-run news outlets. She chanted, "Stop the war, no war," while holding up a sign reading, "Don't believe propaganda, they are lying to you." Russia has made it a criminal offense to spread what it sees as false information about its military invasion. The woman was identified as an editor at the network and has been reportedly detained by police. A new round of protests are rolling in. Coming up, where the next convoy is expected. Global National is broadcasting from Ottawa. We'll be right back in a moment. Another so-called freedom convoy is taking aim at British Columbia's capital. Public health measures have already been eased in BC and across much of Canada, but anti-mandate protesters say that is not enough. As Lauren Pullen reports, some experts say this is a movement that will not be slowing down and has already caused irreversible change in Canada.
There are signs a resurgence is rolling through Western Canada.
We're just a bunch of people that want to stand up for our freedom.
3 weeks after police dismantled the occupation in Ottawa and a month after a border blockade broke down in Alberta, there's anticipation a new truck convoy may next arrive in Victoria at the BC legislature.
Enough is enough. We're not taking it anymore.
That's despite BC already dropping mask mandates and most other COVID restrictions April 8th. In Alberta, protests still fill some Calgary city streets every weekend, weeks after almost all Alberta measures lifted.
There are food vendors, there are merchandise vendors. It is a festival.
They say they're still rallying for all federal mandates to be dropped, but it's also spurred opposition in the form of counter-protests in Calgary. They were pushed back by Calgary police. Whether they remain visible or not, the sentiments expressed by so-called freedom protesters are difficult to dismiss away.
I think the landscape is permanently changed. We're going to get a kind of fracturing of public discourse, a fracturing of social sensibility, a common sense of what it means to be Canadian.
And as long as public health and vaccination remains a political issue as well as a public health matter, experts say these protests will push on.
What we can do is control whether or not we flame or amplify those voices. And my hope is that we've learned some lessons of the last few months.
BC and Alberta's provincial leaders stand united against more protests.
I would suggest that maybe people could find more productive ways of expressing their frustration.
I would just say to these people, goodness me, get a hobby.
Still, the vocal minority vows their fight isn't over yet. Lauren Pullen, Global News, Calgary.
New Brunswick has lifted all its remaining public health restrictions, and it's the second time it has done so since the pandemic began. People in the province no longer need to wear masks indoors, there are no limits on gatherings, and those who have tested positive for COVID-19 do not need to isolate. And in Newfoundland and Labrador, almost all restrictions have been scrapped, though masking is still required in schools and post-secondary institutions, at least until the Easter break. China has imposed strict measures in some of its biggest cities as the country endures its worst COVID-19 wave yet. China recorded almost 3,400 cases in just 2 days. Schools have been closed in Shanghai. The city of Shenzhen, home to 17.5 million people, is locked down. And so is the entire northeastern province of Jilin. The provincial government has banned travel, commenced mass screenings, and mobilized 7,000 military reservists to assist. Just ahead, with prices soaring at the pump, will Canadians reconsider their costly commutes? The national president of Canada's largest private sector union is retiring to focus on his health. Jerry Dias had been on medical leave from Unifor since early February, just after an investigation began on a complaint that Dias breached the Unifor Constitution. The union released no other details. On Friday, Dias, who is 63, informed Unifor's board of his immediate retirement. He'd held the top job at the union for more than 8 years. Unifor represents over 300,000 workers, including many at Global News. Gas prices across the country are reaching new records. Today, the average cost per litre in BC is the highest in Canada, about 20 cents more than the national average, according to the CAA. This morning, a long line of truckers crawling on the Trans-Canada Highway outside of Vancouver protested the cost of fuel during a rainy early commute. But those prices have some people thinking about cutting costs and skipping commuting altogether. And Gaviola has more.
Pain at the pumps, with more likely in store, is pushing many commuters to rethink how they get to work and get around. The Ecology Action Centre says it's fueling a fresh surge of interest in cycling, from models powered by sweat to e-bikes.
Riding a bike is an incredibly affordable alternative to owning a car, based on owning a car or having a lease, gassing it up, and like those yearly maintenance fees and costs.
This bike shop manager in New Brunswick says the COVID bike boom made some customers wait up to a year for deliveries due to supply chain snarls and soaring demand. But this latest boom is one for the books.
Extra challenging with inventory, extra demand, and products just kind of being lined up for customers.
Luckily for Greg Quirk, he already owns a bike. His employer in Ottawa is leaving it up to employees to decide how much or how little they want to be in the office. He plans to ride his bike in some days when the weather is favorable.
Not only in terms of being able to save money, because gas prices are quite high and my car uses premium gas, but just from the activity aspect of it.
Biking isn't the only option. Transit ridership increases by about 1.5% every time gas prices rise by 10%. That's according to the Canadian Urban Transit Association. And eye-popping gas prices have also supercharged interest in electric vehicles.
With increasing gas prices, we've just seen an even further shift. There's a lot of people there coming in and asking for hybrids right off the bat.
Hybrid schedules for workers are also a hot commodity, one of the top perks being demanded in this tight labor market.
Most employees are well aware that it's a candidates market. So if they are inclined to seek other opportunities abound.
With so many proving they can work effectively from home or elsewhere for 2 years and counting, fuel inflation means employers increasingly need to be flexible in this ultra-competitive job market. Anne Gaviola, Global News, Toronto.
Next up, squatters take on Russian elites in London. You're looking at the National War Memorial in the heart of Ottawa. Global National returns right after this break. Protesters were arrested in London after occupying a mansion believed to be owned by a Russian oligarch. For decades, Russian billionaires have used London as a refuge to funnel and store their wealth. But as Redmond Shannon reports, those days may be ending.
They scaled the balcony and decided they wanted to stay.
Until the legal process has been followed, we will stay here, as is our right to protest.
They're calling one of central London's plushest mansions home. It's believed to be owned by recently sanctioned Russian billionaire and Putin ally Oleg Deripaska. The self-described anarchists say they are occupying the 7-bedroom building so it can be used to house Ukrainian refugees.
In recent years, there have been growing calls in the UK for greater transparency surrounding the ownership of some of London's largest mansions, to explain where the money has come from to pay for them. And those calls have come to a head since Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
Various Russian individuals who have links to the Kremlin have donated to our political parties here in the UK.
While Mayor of London, Prime Minister Boris Johnson played tennis with the wife of a Russian politician in exchange for a party donation. Influence spans across upper crust life here.
So we've known about the activities of Russia for a long time, and only now, when we're potentially on the verge of World War III, that the UK government is clamping down on this.
Some residents of one London borough say empty mansions owned by foreign shell companies are wreaking havoc on real estate and affecting ordinary Londoners.
We have 3,000 families on the waiting list for a council house. And we have 4 of the top 10 most expensive streets in England.
Activists are calling for more transparency and better enforcement in seizing assets where the source of wealth can't be explained.
And hopefully in the future then those sorts of direct action aren't needed.
And despite the activists being arrested Monday evening, their direct action may be working. A British government minister has now also suggested that seized mansions should be used to house refugees. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
And that is Global National for this Monday. I'm David Aiken. There is still much uncertainty for Ukraine, but we wanted to leave you tonight with hope for the future. Friends Marta and Paulina fled to Germany while their parents stayed in Ukraine. Despite the raging conflict, the teens say they will return to their homeland one day, not just to finish university or pursue careers, but to rebuild Ukraine themselves.
We are not soft people. We are really strong, and we're going to rebuild our country. And it would be rebuilt by people like me and Paulina.
Thank you for watching. I will see you back here from the nation's capital tomorrow. Good night.